So, do you remember when was the last time you took an IQ test and you were surprised to know your results? Well, it's easy to assume that people with extremely high IQs have a knack for success. Dozens of online intelligence tests promise to measure intelligence and even predict a person's future success. Although the IQ test is very widely used and the results are almost synonymous with our ideas of intelligence, there has always been a lot of criticism of these tests as well and the way the results are used. So, does having a high IQ score guarantee a success in later life? Let's find out. Years of research points to the same squirmy conclusion. Smart people make better workers. Some research indicates a correlation between a high intelligence and mental health issue, and there is not much evidence that a high IQ can predict anything about the likelihood of success, whether be financial, academic, or creative. The IQ test may predict which people can have a certain type of intellectual potential, but they don't necessarily predict who will become a good teacher, a good manager, or a good person. Some go to an extent and say that the only thing IQ can test really is to predict who will do well on these tests. The very first IQ test was designed to identify school children in need of extra academic help. Over the time, the intention was flipped, and the tests transformed into a means to identify people who had higher than the average intelligence. IQ is a construct that encompasses problem-solving abilities, spatial manipulation, and language acquisition. On an IQ test, a score of 100 is average. Someone who has 125 or above is in the top 5%, and the two most common IQ tests are Stanford Binet and Wilshire scale. Versions of these are now used by the military and some schools. Standard intelligence tests focus a lot on exploring the measuring linguistic, logical, mathematical ability, whereas IQ is measurement of your ability to reason, process information, and use it to solve a problem. Several experts in the field of intelligence have proposed that we need to broaden our understanding of what intelligence really is and the role it plays in a successful living. Researchers reviewed dozens of studies and found that smarter people generally perform better at work, probably because smarter people learn new skills more quickly, especially in a highly demanding field such as medicine, law for instance. The ability to process and retain information is the key. Research in this field has shown many individuals and social factors also affects a person's outcome, such as motivation, willingness to learn new information, ability to pay attention, mental health, lifestyle factors, stress. Social factors that can affect the success includes social class, whether one comes from wealthy or from poverty, access to economic and social resources such as quality schools, institutional discrimination such as racism, individual discrimination such as discrimination by a teacher. These 5 other skills and traits factor into your career success and overall happiness as well, such as the ability to be outgoing and friendly, self-confidence, being open to new experiences, organizational ability, and strong communication skills. The correlation between IQ scores and socioeconomic status suggests that IQ tests may measure access to opportunity rather than the innate qualities. So whenever you take any kind of an IQ test online, you need to remember a few things. First is do not equate IQ with intelligence. Second, none of the IQ tests that you have encountered have much validity. And finally, an IQ score correlates with success but doesn't dictate and is poor measure of that person. So whatever we know about the IQ correlation pertains to a group of people. They are statistical measures. Their relevance for an individual is difficult to evaluate. And finally, if you have to know or if you happen to know your IQ scores, Don't think of it as something that limits or defines your potential. If your IQ is in the average range, it does not and in any way mean you are limited to a life of average success or average accomplishment. If your IQ is in the above average range, it does not guarantee you a life of ease. You can't use either an high IQ or a low one as an excuse not to try very hard. In other words, a lower IQ doesn't necessarily doom you to an unsuccessful or unfulfilling life, especially if you work to maximize your strongest skill and traits. Your IQ is only a number. It does not define you, and it does not really limit you. It is just a starting point. Remember that many of other qualities you already possess or can develop are also important for success in life. So the bottom line is that the person with the highest IQ in the room might not be guaranteed the most success, but they certainly have a head start. With this signing off, see you around in the next week with similar concepts. Stay tuned, stay smart, stay informed.